It's February 16th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with North Korea's offer for a summit with Japan. The leader Kim Jong-un's sister Kim Yo-jong says a summit between Pyongyang and Tokyo is possible, as long as the regime's nuclear and missile development and abduction issues don't get in the way. The rare offer came just a day after the surprise announcement of South Korea-Cuba diplomatic relations. Doctors at the top 5 big hospitals here in South Korea say they will hand in their resignation and in fact stop working as of 6 a.m. on the 20th. The collective decision came right after staging nationwide rallies against the medical school quota hike on Thursday. This year's World Team Table Tennis Championships takes place for the first time in South Korea in the port city of Busan on Friday. More than 2,000 athletes from 47 countries will be competing to prove themselves over the next 10 days. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's sister Kim Yo-jong says Pyongyang is open to softening its relations with Tokyo, including inviting the Japanese leader to the north. Now, the rare offer is seen as a way of holding South Korea in check against its recent forging of diplomatic ties with the North's long friend Cuba. Kim Yo-jong has our top story.
Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korea's leader, expressed optimistic intentions regarding improving ties with Japan a day after South Korea forged diplomatic ties with Cuba. According to the regime's state-run Korean Central News Agency on Thursday, Kim said that Pyongyang and Tokyo can open a new future together if Japan makes a political decision to improve relations. The remarks came after Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida last week said that he feels a strong need to change the current relations between the two sides and that related activities are currently taking place. Kishida last May had also expressed a desire to meet with Kim Jong-un. Kim Yo-jong added that Kishida's visit to North Korea might happen on the condition that Japan is willing to leave the past abduction of Japanese citizens off the table. Relations between Pyongyang and Tokyo have long been sour, as Japan claims that 17 of its citizens were abducted by North Korea in the 1970s and 80s, and that 12 still remain in the north. North Korea argues that the issue has already been settled, saying that 8 have died and the remaining 4 were never kidnapped. Experts say the remarks could be intended to counter South Korea's recent establishment of diplomatic ties with Cuba, a longtime ally of North Korea. Seeking cooperation with Japan could provide North Korea with a breakthrough, as its diplomatic isolation in the international community is becoming increasingly severe.
I believe the North intends to counter the establishment of diplomatic relations between South Korea and Cuba with a cooperative relationship with Japan, while strengthening the hostile relationship with South Korea.
Kim Yo-jong, however, stressed that her remarks were solely her personal opinion. She added that the regime's leadership still has no plans to repair relations with Japan and that it remains to be seen what Kishida's intentions are in the future. Kim Yo-jong, Arirang News.
So, North Korea's offer to hold a summit with Japan under certain conditions came just a day after a new diplomatic chapter opened between South Korea and Cuba. What's on the North's mind? Let's turn to Professor Lee Hyun for more. Great to have you back.
Thanks for having me again.
Good morning. Can the North's rare offer be seen as a response to South Korea-Cuba relations, really?
It might be, but I think it's difficult to say at this point that there's a causal link between, South Korea establishing diplomatic ties with Cuba and now, North Korea making this gesture to Japan to have a summit between the two leaders. But, North Korea, of course, has significant issues with Japan, and namely the biggest issue from the Japanese perspective, of course, domestically is the kidnapping of Japanese citizens back in the 70s and 80s that, North Korea has responded to, as you noted in the report, that all of them have died. But there's suspicions in Japan that there are more, in fact, Japanese citizens that are currently living in North Korea. So Prime Minister Kishida has constantly made efforts to try to engage North Korea. And North Korea now responding in this way, I think certainly is a positive sign. But it's really, I think at this point, really too hard to say whether or not this is sort of a tit for tat for South Korea to sort of establish ties with Cuba. But in any event, with respect to this issue, it's certainly possible that this is a response because within North Korea, the ruling elite, I think, will take this as quite a shock that South Korea has established Cuba relations. And so maybe this is a response to sort of allay and so to a drive within the ruling elite within North Korea that North Korea is doing something positive internationally.
Right, and South Korea has had long pursued diplomatic ties with Cuba. Then what took South Korea and Cuba so long to establish official diplomatic connections? I mean, what's behind Cuba's decision this time?
Right. So Cuba, I think, certainly is in a position where it needs to sort of kind of kickstart its economy. And it's been in isolation with respect to the West, particularly the United States in this regard. And, has lost a lot of trade volume over the years in terms of its embargo with the United States. But I think, South Korea, of course, has a very positive image around the world, given recent events in South Korea, but also the impact of soft power of South Korea. And so, because of the growing number of investments as well as visitors to Cuba from South Korea, I think Cuba recognizes that it doesn't make sense for Cuba not to forge relations with South Korea anymore. And from a purely economic perspective, there's a lot to be gained by having South Korean companies invest more in Cuba, and for Cubans to sort of have more access to South Korean products and services. And so from Cuba's perspective, it does make a lot of sense for Cuba to be able to sort of establish these diplomatic relations sort of in a normal way.
Right, Professor Yi, you mentioned the news must have been a shock for North Korea, and South Korea's top office believes the newly forged ties will be a big blow to the North. Is that so? I mean, how?
Because traditionally, Cuba and North Korea have been seen to be like basically, a very strong sister relationship between the two countries, especially when Fidel Castro became the leader of Cuba. Because they're both communist nations, there's some solidarity, obviously between the two sides, and both sides basically were very tight-knit in terms of their relations to each other, even throughout the Cold War and after the Cold War ended. And so in this case, with South Korea now establishing regular diplomatic relations with Cuba, this is going to be a huge psychological and political blow within Pyongyang, basically, because this relationship has been so important to North Korea in terms of its international relations. And so from this perspective, I think there's going to be a lot of, I think within the party in North Korea, there's going to be a lot of questions about what happened here and how Cuba was maybe, quote unquote, lost to South Korea in this case. And so we'll see, I think, the ramifications of this played out in the next days and weeks and months ahead.
Definitely. Then I have to ask you, will Pyongyang turn away from Cuba or bring Cuba closer? I mean, I'm sure the North has a lot on its mind at the moment.
Absolutely. I imagine one of the first steps will be for the Cuban ambassador to explain, right, to the leadership in Pyongyang, basically, what happened and how this occurred, given their very close relations. Because, in fact, it's going to be seen as a great embarrassment to North Korea, because one of its closest allies who has stuck with it for, thick and thin throughout the last, many years since Fidel Castro became the ruler of Cuba, how Cuba was now able to now become a regular sort of partner, or have a regular relationship with South Korea, because South Korea and North Korea now are in a position of being essentially enemies, right? So in this case, I think in this case we'll see North Korea reassessing its relationship, but I don't think it's going to shy away from Cuba, but certainly probably make more efforts to engage Cuba more given this circumstance.
Definitely. All right, Professor Lee Hee-yeon, we appreciate your insight and your time this morning. You have a great day.
You too.
Following nationwide rallies against the government's expansion of medical school admissions, residents at 5 major hospitals in Seoul have decided to take collective action. The Interns and Residents Association says they'll hand in their resignations by next Monday and quit the following day. Lee Seung-jae has more.
In response to the government's decision to increase the medical school admissions quota by 2,000 to over 5,000 by 2025, residents at 5 major hospitals in Seoul announced they will take collective action. According to the Korean Intern Resident Association on Friday, as a result of discussions with residents at the so-called Big Five hospitals, all residents at those hospitals will submit their resignations by the 19th and will stop working after 6 a.m. on the 20th. The Big Five hospitals refer to Seoul National University Hospital, Seoul Asan Medical Center, Catholic University of Korea Seoul St. Mary's Hospital, Severance Hospital, and Samsung Medical Center. The decision to hand in their resignation comes as Kira and Big Five representatives urgently discussed measures to respond to the government plans from 11 p.m. Thursday to 2 a.m. Friday. Some of the participating hospitals have already confirmed that all of their residents already agreed to hand in their resignation letters. The association said it would form an emergency response committee with representatives from the hospitals participating in the collective action to see if all teaching hospitals would participate in submitting resignation letters as well. Meanwhile, if collective action goes ahead as planned, it would mark the 4th time doctors have taken such action since the first medical strike in 2000. As of last year, it was reported that there were about 2,700 residents working at the Big Five hospitals. On Thursday, the government stated that it would not back down despite continued warnings, saying that the collective action by doctors opposing the expansion of medical schools was an act of using patients as tools for their own greed. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The Korea Football Association National Team Committee on Thursday agreed to suggest the firing of Jurgen Klinsmann, the head coach of the men's national football team, over his leadership skills and tactics. Now, a decision on Klinsmann's future will be made by the association's chairman in the coming hour. Ian Hee reports.
The Korea Football Association National Team Committee on Thursday agreed to suggest the firing of Jurgen Klinsmann, the head coach of the men's national team. However, the final call can only be made by the Korea Football Association's president, Chung Mong-gyu. The committee announced its decision at a press briefing at the KFA headquarters in Seoul, citing concerns about Klinsmann's leadership skills and tactics.
For various reasons, there was a conclusion that Coach Klinsmann can no longer serve as the leader of the national team and needs to be replaced.
Director Hwang Bo-gan, a former player and coach himself, added that some saw Klinsmann's lack of commitment as he was mostly working in the U.S., where he lives, and not spending much time in South Korea, as disrespectful towards the Korean public. Klinsmann attended via video link as he had already returned to his home in the U.S. and reportedly said during the session that he was unaware that a committee meeting was due to take place. After South Korea lost 2-0 to Jordan in the semi-final of the Asian Cup in Qatar this month, this content began to grow among the fans due to Klinsmann's perceived lack of tactical acumen. In addition, the recent admission of a fallout between some of the players in the build-up to the Jordan match has further raised concerns regarding the coach's man management abilities, particularly as it appeared to impact the team's performance. Amid growing voice for KFA's president to take responsibility for hiring Klinsmann and resign from the head of the association, the chairman has been selected as a candidate for the AFC Executive Committee election, which takes place in May 2024. Lee Eun-hee, Arirang News.
This year's World Team Table Tennis Championships will kick off in the southeastern port city of Busan on Friday, marking the first time South Korea has hosted the event. The tournament will run from Friday to February 25th at the Busan Exhibition and Convention Center. More than 2,000 athletes from 47 countries will be competing, with the top 8 men's and women's teams set to qualify for the Olympics in Paris this summer. In even-numbered years, the World Championships feature men's and women's teams events, while individual events take place in odd-numbered years. South Korea was supposed to host in 2020, but that was delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Korea's tech exports in the first month of 2024 secured a 2-digit expansion on-year for the first time in 20 months, largely driven by chip shipments. Our economics correspondent An Sung-jin has the details.
A strong chip performance pulled up South Korea's tech exports once again.
With a steady increase in outbound shipments of semiconductors, which began last November, the country's ICT exports saw a surplus of $4.5 billion for the month of January. Data from the Trade Ministry on Thursday show that the value of exports stood at $16.35 billion, which is a 25% on-year increase. This is the first time that exports increased by double digits since May 2022. The figure has been attributed to an increase in semiconductor exports, which climbed by 53%. Memory chip exports, which jumped by 90% compared to the year before, and a rise in the average unit prices of DRAM chips pushed up the value of chip exports. Increased shipments of displays for high-value added products such as TVs and laptops also added to the growth in the value of ICT exports. Alongside outbound shipments of semiconductors and displays, computers and telecommunication devices all climbed by more than 25% on-year as well. However, mobile industry exports saw a drop of nearly 10% year-on-year due to weaker demand as well as a high base effect from the year before. By country, South Korea's tech exports saw an increase in shipments to most countries, including China, Vietnam, the United States, and Japan, while shipments to the European Union were also up. This was once again led by a strong performance of semiconductor exports. China is South Korea's largest ICT export destination, with nearly 50% of outbound shipments heading there. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
A major economic hurdle for South Korea to overcome this year is the country's equity market or stocks that's been devalued by what's called the Korea discount. The government is set to propose a new reform to tackle this ongoing issue later this month. Moon Hae-ryun reports.
제 임기 중에 글로벌 스탠다드에 맞지 않는 자본시장의 규제는 과감하게 혁파해서 글로벌 증시 수준으로 코리아 디스카운트를 해소할 것입니다.
President Yoon Suk-yeol pledged to reform the country's stock market, starting with the short-selling ban last year and following up with a new program that's to come. Korea discount refers to a phenomenon in which the value of companies listed on the Korean stock market is lower than that of other major countries. And it's a very real issue. According to the Korea Exchange, the PB ratio of the country's benchmark Kospi is one of the lowest out of the 38 OECD member countries. PB stands for price-to-book ratio, and it shows the market valuation of a company compared to its book value. If the PB ratio is lower than 1, it means that the company's current stock value is lower than the money left from selling its assets. A general outline of the corporate value-up program was released last month, and it aims to increase the value of stocks with low PB ratios. While the finer details will be announced sometime later this month, it is already affecting the market. The Kospi Composite Index surged from the 2,400 mark to over 2,620 over the past few weeks, and foreign investments began piling in. In February so far, offshore investors bought nearly $4.5 billion worth of local stocks, which is the fifth largest monthly sum to date, despite only being halfway through the month. Experts are hopeful about what the program could continue to do for the market once it goes into effect.
We can look forward to an increase in capital efficiency and greater ROE for firms with low PB ratios, leading to a rise in PB ratios for these firms.
But some are wary that this could die down just as quickly and that they will need to be followed up with policies over a period of time.
They have to be followed by further reforms and further commitment by Korean companies and the Korean government that stockholders' value will be respected. Because the Korean discount has lasted for decades, any short-term programs are not going to be able to eliminate Korean discount.
There are also concerns that as the current program looks as though it will be more of an advisory than an enforcement, requiring firms to set target goals, it could fall flat. Further details will be needed to see how the government plans to address these concerns. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Kim Yo-jong, and now we turn off to stories from around the world. We begin today in Russia, where a Ukrainian missile attack on the southern Russian city of Belgorod on Thursday has left at least 7 dead, including a 1-year-old girl. Russia's health ministry confirmed the 7 deaths and said 18 others, including 4 children, were hospitalized, with 6 in serious condition. According to regional authorities, Ukraine's attack left severe damage to a shopping center, a sports complex, and nearby apartment blocks. While Kyiv made no immediate comments, Russia's foreign ministry called the attack a monstrous crime against civilians. Located some 40 kilometers from the border, Belgorod is the nearest major Russian city to Ukraine. Last December, Ukrainian drone and missile attacks on Belgorod killed 25 civilians and prompted hundreds of residents to evacuate. Moving over to the United States, where Kansas City police have said that the deadly shooting at Wednesday's Super Bowl celebration started from a dispute between several people on the day of the parade. The shooting left 1 dead and more than 20 injured. While no suspects have yet been charged, Kansas City police has 2 juveniles in custody and identified that the shooting stemmed from a personal dispute. A 3rd person who had been detained was released on Thursday, as they were cleared of any involvement in the shooting. Kansas City Police Chief Stacey Graves said that there were no links to terrorism. The parade for Kansas City Chiefs' Super Bowl victory amassed around 1 million fans and parade goers. According to the Gun Violence Archive, the shooting at the parade was at least the 48th mass shooting in the United States this year. Now, another story from the U.S., where former U.S. President Donald Trump's bid to dismiss an indictment case related to hush money paid to a porn star has failed. A New York judge on Thursday denied the request. Following the ruling by Justice Juan Merchan, Trump is set to become the first former U.S. president to stand trial on criminal charges, with March 25th set as the trial date. Trump had been seeking the dismissal of a 34-count indictment over the falsification of business records to cover up a payment of $130,000 to porn star Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election.
That ends now. My attorney.
And finally, to Brazil's Rio de Janeiro, where the annual Festival of Color and Energy, Carnival, is coming to an end. The 2024 Rio Carnival Festival, which began on the 9th of February, will see its final day of celebrations on Saturday, February the 17th. And after competition between Rio's elite samba schools at the world-famous Samba Dome, it was the Viradouro Samba School that took the victory. This means that the Viradouro School will have the honor of reprising their performance at the Champions Parade on Saturday.
Good morning. From April-like temperatures to late winter conditions in just one day, it absolutely felt nothing like spring is on its way, with snow and wind yesterday in the capital area. And this morning, we are starting off the day with sub-zero temperatures, seeing the lows nearly 10 degrees lower than the same time yesterday in many parts of the country. And those in Gangwon province need to be safe on the roads today. Highs will rise fast though, going a couple of degrees higher in the capital than yesterday, topping out at about 8 degrees. Then spring warmth returns for the weekend. Central regions will have highs that are similar to slightly higher, but those in southern provinces will notice much cooler highs, going down about 5 to 8 degrees at 10 degrees Celsius in Daegu and Busan this afternoon under brighter skies. Then Saturday looks to be a sunny one nationwide. Rain is in the forecast on Sunday. Up and down temperatures continue next week with frequent precipitation in the forecast, so please take good care. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back next week for Monday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.